A long, long time ago, there lived a mouse whose name was Eric. Eric was an ordinary mouse, like all the others. He had grey fur, a pointy nose, and a long tail. But Eric was very, very sad. He longed to fly, just like birds. Every time Eric looked up and saw birds gracefully flying, he sighed and thought, "If only I could fly like that," and then tears would come to his eyes. One day Eric was collecting seeds in the field. He saw an eagle flying. It is not safe for mice to watch eagles. Eagles enjoy mice for breakfast. But the bird was circling so beautifully up there in the sky that he just had to watch. The eagle noticed a mouse and prepared to dive and catch the little mouse. Quicker and quicker the eagle came down. Just as he was about to catch the mouse, Eric jumped aside. The eagle closed his claws, but missed. He looked back to where his breakfast had gone and hit his head against a tree. Unconscious, the eagle crashed. He fell to the ground with an awful wound on his head. Eric had seen it all happen and ran to his own hole, collected plasters and scissors, and went back to the eagle, which was still unconscious on the ground. The mouse licked the wound clean on the head of the bird and bound the wound. Afterwards, he took a few drops of water from the flower and let the drops slide into the throat of the injured eagle. That woke the animal up. He opened his eyes, saw the mouse, felt the bandage with his claw, and asked, "Little mouse, have you cleaned my wound and bandaged it?" Eric nodded in confirmation. The eagle thanked the mouse extensively and explained that he himself would have been food for a cat or a fox if he had stayed on the ground like that. "Why did you help me?" And the mouse explained how beautifully the eagle flew and how much he would like to fly himself. As he spoke, tears came into his eyes and the eagle started to pity him. The predator proposed Eric should glue some of the eagle's feathers to his paws, climb a tree, and then jump. And then just flap with your paws. And so it happened. The eagle shuffled a few nice feathers from his pack. The mouse glued the feathers to his front paws and climbed a tree. He looked down. Whoa, pretty scary. "Come on, jump," called the eagle. Eric let himself fall. But it didn't go well. No matter how the mouse flapped, he kept falling, faster and faster. Fortunately, the mouse landed on a soft piece of moss and didn't break anything. "Well," the eagle commented, "that doesn't seem to work." Saddened, the mouse took the feathers from his paws. Suddenly, the eagle cried, "I have an idea! The bird witch! She will know what to do." The little mouse still wanted very much to fly and listened with anticipation. The eagle spoke of a curious bird witch who lived in the mountains in Morocco and who had done many wonders. "But," explained the eagle, "for every wish fulfilled, there is a counter effort, something to relinquish, something you will have to give up." The mouse said he would do anything to be able to fly. "How do I get there?" Eric went on his way, southwards. The eagle had explained it is very easy. When the sun is at its highest point, that is the direction you have to go. First, the mouse went through Belgium. Oh, how friendly the Belgian mice were. Everywhere he went, Eric was given fries and beer. That made him very happy. In France, travelling was a pleasure as well. Everywhere, the French mice had different kinds of cheese, and occasionally a drop of wine. The trip went over hills, through valleys, and eventually Eric had to climb upwards. Mice he encountered explained these were the Pyrenees, and that it would get easier once in Spain. There it was downhill again. In Spain, Eric made contacts with the Spanish mice quite easily. The Spanish mice were very talkative, but were also curious to hear about his adventures. He was given jamón, pieces of nice hard ham. Oh, how difficult it was to leave the mice with whom he had become friends. Finally, he arrived in Gibraltar. There, in the harbour, Eric encountered Juan, a mouse with a wooden paw. Juan explained he had often sailed the seas, robbing cargo from vessels. He understood that Juan was a mousy robber. But that story I will tell you another time. Eric asked Juan what was the best way to cross the sea to Morocco. Juan pointed out a boat which was bound for Morocco, and how he would have to board by walking the rope that extended from the vessel to the shore. Eric thanked Juan and boarded the boat. The boat journey didn't take very long. A few hours later, the mouse found himself in Morocco. Eric proceeded southwards. He had grown accustomed to walking long distances and had developed strong paw muscles. In Morocco, the food was wonderful. Mice here always have pastries with nuts and sugar syrup. And that was convenient because he needed his energy to climb the Atlas Mountains. The bird witch was very well known here, and all the animals sent the little mouse in the right direction. And finally, after that long journey, Eric arrived at the bird witch. A big black bird with fiery red eyes. He was afraid, but then realized how far he had travelled, gathered his courage and stepped forward. The bird witch listened. "Well," said the bird witch, "I can help you to change into a flying animal, but that will mean that you will lose the better part of your eyesight. After the change, you will only see contours at a distance." That startled Eric. The eagle had warned that he would have to give up something to make his dream come true. But the idea that he would lose part of his eyesight for the rest of his life was a scary thought. The little mouse told the bird witch he needed to consider this. For a few days, Eric weighed up his choices, went back to the bird witch and explained that he would give up anything to be able to fly, even the better part of his eyesight. Well then, the bird witch poured some peculiar things into a jar. She then stirred the ingredients into an ointment. The beast smelled and moaned in appreciation. Eric would have to apply the ointment on the side of his body between his front and hind legs 3 times a day for 1 week. Conscientiously, Eric smeared the ointment in a line between his front and hind legs. The first days, nothing happened, but on the 3rd day, a thin membrane appeared. A day later, the membrane was thicker, like skin. Eric noticed his sight was deteriorating. The following days, his paws grew longer and the skin between became tougher. Eric again climbed a tree and let himself fall. He noticed the skin between his legs filled with air and that he did not drop like a stone. He landed not too hard, quite a distance away. He could hardly see now. With some effort, he found another tree and attempted again. Eric climbed up and jumped off. He moved his paws, and lo and behold, he stayed in the air. Eric was filled with joy. He could fly. But then, bang! And dizzily, Eric faltered to the ground. He had flown against something. His sight was so poor that he could hardly see. Eric was now able to fly, but he couldn't see where he was flying to. Why hadn't he thought of that before he agreed to exchange his sight for wings? He was angry with himself and screamed in anger. A few seconds later, he heard from far away in the mountains a similar scream as he had made. What was that? Was there another angry mouse in these mountains? Eric shouted loudly, "Hey, who's there?" And a moment later, the same words came back to him. Eric started to understand he was hearing his echo. He also tried other sounds. After a day of walking and screaming, he found that when he squeaked, he heard the sounds a few times back. Everything around him, all the trees, all the bushes, the ground, everything reflected the sound he made. Eric climbed a tree again and let himself fall out. Again, the skin between his legs filled, and he floated. By squeaking again and again, and by listening to the echo, Eric knew exactly where the trees were, where the stone wall was, and Eric could even determine branches. Eric was filled with joy. His wish to be able to fly had finally come true. In Morocco, one day Eric found Layla, a female mouse who had observed his flying with admiration. Eric and Layla had a litter of small mice, and these baby mice also had skin between their front and hind legs. But unfortunately, just like their father, they couldn't see well. But the baby mice also learnt to fly and steer using their echo. Eric, Layla and the children lived happily ever after and had many offspring. This is how bats came into being. To this very day, there are bats all around the world. In the evening, when it is quiet, you may get lucky and see a bat flying by. When you see one, think of Eric and think of the sacrifice the little mouse made to be able to fly.